Sorry about that.
Hey, no worries. Excellent. And hello to everybody else who is joining us. I am Leah from Connected AU, and I am so excited because we are joined with the delightful Madeliene Cleary. And this month we are diving into Butterfly Women, which was an unforgettable historical novel that blends fierce female characters and untold history against the evocative backdrop of 1860s Melbourne. I'm so honored to be chatting to you today, author Madeliene. Sorry, loved the book, author Madeliene.
Oh, thank you.
And not only are you a brilliant storyteller, but this novel is deeply personal and drawn from your own family's history, uncovered through lots and lots of research. Before we start chatting to Madeline, if anybody does have a comment or a question, just pop your name into the chat. We're very relaxed. I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go, and you can ask Madeline your question, or I can read it for you if you prefer to stay anonymous. Okay, Madeline, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much, Leah. And yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. And thanks for choosing the Butterfly Women for this month as
Yeah.
well. It's really exciting.
Oh, great book, and it's been getting wonderful reviews. So huge congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's strange because I suppose when I started writing it, when before you get your contract, you never really think that anyone's going to read it except your mum. So it's quite amazing to have
Yeah.
people reading it, engaging with it. I'm so
How
pleased.
exciting. Yeah, look, I'd love to start at the beginning and ask what inspired Butterfly Women. I understand part of the story came from a pretty wild family discovery.
It was very wild. It happened a while ago, so it was about 2014. So I was in my mid-20s. I was pretty young, and I wasn't probably as engaged as I was now in the family history. My dad had just started doing some research on Ancestry.com, and he was contacted by a distant relative who he'd matched with on the site through
Oh,
DNA,
wow.
which is pretty cool. And this woman had done a couple of pages of research into what she termed as the notorious Irish Cleary family of 19th century
Oh,
Melbourne.
sorry, I think I've lost you.
Oh, really? Oh, I can still hear you. Oh,
Can anybody else hear Madeline?
hello?
Just pop into the chat if anybody can hear her.
No? Can you hear me now? No, I've frozen. Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Oh, oh, you're
Yes.
back,
Oh,
Leah.
you can hear. Okay, sorry. I think thanks Faye, thanks Tammy. I'm sorry. It just completely froze. I don't know what's happened.
I'm glad it's not my internet, so that's a relief.
It is I'm in Sydney and it is freezing. But I don't know if that's affecting the
It's too
internet.
cold.
Let's blame it on the cold weather. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
no,
so you were
no, all
saying
good.
that
Yeah.
it came, yeah,
I
from
left you all in suspense, so on what the discovery was.
yeah,
So she'd done a couple of pages of research, and yeah, so where she said she's passed on this message saying, "Do you know that you're related to this very notorious Irish Cleary family?" And Dad was like, "No, like we had no idea what was our family line."
yeah.
And so it started and triggered a whole few years of, particularly in my dad, because he was retired, looking into some of the stories. And the stories that most captured me and my interest were the women, because while the men were in jail for most crimes you can imagine. So when you think Irish criminal family, I thought of the men straight away. And
Yeah.
perhaps that's my bias. But it was the women who probably spent the most time in jail, and it was the women who were of most note in the newspapers of the day. So my dad discovered about 200 pages worth of newspaper articles about our family, and they detailed the court sessions that all the women were arrested for. And so they were arrested for crimes like vagrancy, disorderliness, aggravated assault, all sorts of things. But what they weren't arrested for was prostitution. So what we discovered is they actually lived and worked in brothels in 19th century
Mm.
Melbourne.
So
Get
surprising.
started.
You're right. Yeah, completely interesting and surprising and intriguing. So I'm glad that you delved into that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's pretty. How can you not write a novel when you discover your great 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 grandmother was known as Mother Cleary and she was a madam?
Yeah, no, that is so cool. I think you're so fortunate as well to get all of that information about your family because I think not many people are able to uncover that much detail about,
Yeah.
distant relatives and ancestors and stuff. And I would
Particularly
imagine,
working class women, I think, as well, who are the
absolutely,
literate. So, yeah,
yes.
definitely.
And was it extra special because you kind of made this discovery with your father? It must have been a great bonding experience for you guys.
It was really, really great. And I'd actually moved interstate at that time as well. I was living in Canberra for work.
Mm,
So this was a really nice way for us to stay connected.
yeah.
I mean, AFL will always keep us connected with Dad, but we also had the family history. And so, yeah, I remember all these. I used to take walks at lunchtime in my job and we'd
Mm.
discuss the latest findings. So it was something really lovely about it.
Yeah. And did you know straight away that this was something that you wanted to write about? So you said you made this discovery, was it 2014?
Yeah,
Uh,
2014. I mean, it was always an idea in my head that well, actually, I didn't actually think I would write it. I thought someone surely has written a fictional book about this.
right.
And so I remember Googling it and not finding much. And really, there was not that much written about the women as well. That surprised me at the time.
Mm.
And so I started getting serious about writing in about 2016. I actually wrote three other books, which I just put in the drawer. They were kind of my practice novels.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until 2019 when I said, okay, I feel ready, because I didn't feel ready to write a novel like this, I think, initially. I needed to develop my craft
Yeah.
because it's a difficult one. It's, if, as you know, four perspectives.
Yeah.
Um, there's
And
a
there's a
crime.
mystery. There's so many elements in this. There's like historical and yes, the
Yes,
mystery element. It's a lot of hard work. Yeah.
it's a lot of work,
Yes. Yes.
and I think by 2019 I was ready. But then I started writing it, and I actually wrote 30,000 words, and then I realized I'd started in the wrong place. I'd actually spent
Oh
the
no.
whole time on the boat coming to Australia. And I was like, this is a third of the novel, and I think this novel's actually about Melbourne. So I realized that it was all wrong. So I threw it all away. And then it wasn't until 2022 when I picked it back up again. And that was because amazing historian Barbara Minchington wrote The Women of Little Lon. And
Mhm.
that really was the thing that sparked it, I suppose.
Right. Got it all happening.
Yeah.
Um, so many questions for you. From, the idea until publication was about 10 years. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
10 years.
amazing.
That's the
Lovely.
lifespan of a novel. Yeah,
Yes,
the life
yes.
cycle.
And clearly, a lot of evidence was put into the book. Can you kind of tell us, like, how did you start? So you got the newspaper articles, and then did you reach out to historians or, yeah, I'd love to hear
Yeah.
about the research process.
Yeah. Oh, writing historical fiction, I always said after I wrote this one, I'm like, I'm never doing this again. But again, I'm finding I'm drawn back to it because the
Yeah,
world is so cool, and
yeah.
once you're in the world, you've got that incredible, it's escapism, I think. And so what I had, yes, you're right. I had the newspaper articles, but then I needed to understand what life was like. So I worked opposite the National Library of Australia for a time in Canberra, and I would go there a lot on weekends. So I'd spend a lot of time in the reading room,
Mhm.
and I spent about 3 years doing that, just on weekends going. So I had a whole bunch of research, and then I mentioned Barbara Minchington. So in 2022, I reached out to her.
Yep.
I didn't tell her I was writing a novel. I just said, "Oh, I loved your book, and I'm related to the Clearys." And she actually said she had been doing research on our family, which I
Wow.
didn't know, which
That's
was really, really
incredible.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, super cool. And so she provided a whole lot of research that she'd done.
Yeah.
So we started this email trail for over 3 years. We've got this long email trail.
Phenomenal.
Actually,
Yeah.
once a
Insane.
firm had acquired the book, I then told her that I was writing this novel,
Yeah.
and I was really lucky. She actually read a very early copy.
Sorry, can you just mute Alex? Sorry. Uh, sorry, just I'll try and mute them. Okay.
No,
There we
that's
go.
all good. I'll just keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I read. So she read an early draft. She helped me with lots of questions, like things, random things, like street names, laneway names were colloquial, and so they
Okay.
might have been known by multiple different names. And I found that in the research, and I wanted
Yeah.
it to be historically accurate. So she was
Yeah.
able to give me guidance on that. And I think that's really important. Even though it's fiction, you want to
Mm.
the reader, and I think
Adds to
historical
the
fiction.
authenticity for sure, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I loved that you put all of those little details in. I think it brings it to life so richly in the novel. Anything really surprising or shocking that you learnt about sex work in the 19th century Melbourne, that you were just absolutely floored by, that you couldn't believe?
Yeah, well, I mean, I still don't know if I believe it or not, but there is a room. Well, there's two interesting rumors. One is that there was a golden mace in Parliament House, and the mace was worth a lot of money, and it was used to open up Parliament. And of
Okay.
course, Parliament is opposite Little Lawn,
Yeah.
as we know. And the ministers would walk over. And so the rumor is that one night the parliamentarians decided to bring the mace over to Little Lawn, to the brothels,
Oh, wow.
and used as you can imagine what it was
Something.
used
Yes.
for.
Yes. Wow.
But the mace went missing that night, and no one actually knows. And it's still missing today. There's a reward for it. So this is in 1891, I think. And
Uh-huh.
so the rumor is that Madame Brussels and her women stole the
Stole
mace.
it.
That's
Wow.
the
Now,
rumor.
infamous Mace. Love that story.
Infamous mace. And then
Yep.
the other one is again about Madame Brussels herself. She was found when she died, she had in her purse a coin, and the coin was curved. And they said the rumor was that women in the 19th century used a bent coin as a form of contraception.
Oh, okay.
And of course, you don't really think you take contraception for granted these days, but
Yes.
they had to
Yes.
use some well, that was quite interesting. And then, they were using all sorts of awful
Nasty
carcinogenic,
things. Yeah, I
nasty
think that,
things.
there were a few little touches on that in the book, and yeah,
Yes, yes. Oh, I think the
eye-opening
mercury
how lucky we
douches
are.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, nasty, nasty stuff.
yes.
Yeah. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to convey about Melbourne in the 19th century, or just Melbourne, to anybody who might be a little bit unfamiliar with, Melbourne's history? It sounded like a
Um,
little bit, yeah, clearly you love Melbourne. I'm not sure if that's where you're from originally. Well, yes.
yeah, I'm from
Cleary
Melbourne
start, but
originally.
yeah.
I think I wrote it, and people have said this about it, that it was a bit of a love letter to the city
Mm,
because, and I wrote it mostly outside of Melbourne. I wrote most of it I actually wrote in China, which is a little bit random.
yeah.
Over during COVID, I was there in China from 2020 to 2022, so for a couple of years. So I wrote most of it away, and I think I couldn't travel home because of COVID, and so instead I spent so long just on Google Maps tracing the
Living
footsteps of the
inside, yeah,
characters.
Melbourne in your head.
Yeah, and I guess like I'm a Melburnian, but I didn't know anything about this history. Like I
Yeah.
actually knew so little.
Mm,
What really shocked me was how much agency women had in those days, and it's not something you quite expect.
yeah.
I think you think 19th century oppression of women, exploitation, degradation, and there was all of that, of course.
Yeah. Well,
But
still taboo to show their ankles. So, yeah,
yeah,
it's shocking to think
exactly.
that they were able to, run brothels and stuff when,
Exactly. It wasn't illegal. It was
yeah.
kind of tolerated and
Yeah.
accepted in a way. And these women created these businesses and owned property, and that was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's mind-boggling that they were able to, yeah, like own property, but then, yeah, they had to, conform to other regulations when they were out in public and, yeah,
Exactly.
like have a
Yeah.
chaperone and all of that stuff. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Just speaking of China, I did read somewhere that you had quite a serious accident whilst you were in China, and just before finishing the book. And I think you were told by doctors that, you were lucky to be alive. Do you think that sort of experience affected the book or your writing or anything?
Yeah,
Like a
yeah. It
yeah.
was, I smile, but it was a pretty traumatic experience. I fell off my bike in a remote province and fractured my jaw in three places
Oh
and cracked a whole bunch
gosh.
of teeth and all sorts of nasty things. And yeah, literally a week before I was meant to be going home officially.
Oh
So
man.
I really did a number. And yeah, I actually I did write the last part of the book after that accident, the ending. And everyone, should I spoil the ending? No, I better
I
not.
think oh,
Just
maybe not, because we will share this with everybody. I'm sure
yes.
the people who are on here have read it, but
Well,
lots of
what
people
I
watch the recordings afterwards, actually. Way more people watch the recordings afterwards. So
perfect. I will not spoil it, but what I
yeah.
will say is that there is someone whose jaw
Mm.
is
Yes,
fractured and
yes.
goes through a lot of pain, and that actually was
Was
because I was
inspired.
currently experiencing that. So,
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Oh wow. Okay. Um, and I guess yeah, it would have been an experience as well during lockdown in China and all of that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and this was a way to escape, I think,
Yeah.
for me, that. I mean, I think people in Melbourne probably had it worse than
Yeah.
we were had it in China. I know that people
Right.
always say, "Oh, you were in China during COVID. That must have been really bad." But
Yeah.
mostly, like domestic travel was okay. But there were some times, where weekends and weeks we couldn't leave, and yeah, so it was something. And I suppose I've also brought. There's a Chinese character in the book as well, Lin Chen,
Yes.
and he's from Kaiping, and this is a town that I visited in Guangdong at the time. And it's where Kaiping is such a great, interesting place because there are so many overseas Chinese that can link their ancestry back to Kaiping, and it has this incredible. It's a village, but
Yeah.
it's got this mix of Western and Chinese architecture and mansions because so much money poured
Okay.
into the city coming from the overseas Chinese. So I wanted to have a character and have that connection to the
Yeah.
to all the amazing Australian Chinese that came during that time.
Yeah. Sounds like it could be a very interesting setting for another book, Madeleine.
Yeah.
Sounds like a very cool place.
It is.
And yeah, so you had all these newspaper articles and stuff, and
Mm.
speaking to historians. So I think you would have had like a lot of sort of quotes and stuff from ancestors. Did that shape your approach to dialogue or character development or
Yeah.
anything within the plot? Yeah.
Yeah, so I used a lot of the court scenes in the book I've generated from my own great grandmother's court sessions. She was described as quite an obstinate woman, and so I've definitely leaned into that in some of our characters in the Butterfly Women. And she's also described as an evil wretch and who lives in one of the most disgusting dens in all of Melbourne. So she was described in pretty appalling ways. And so a lot of that language I've then used for, there's a male journalist who writes about the back slums. And a lot of that language that I've used has been pulled directly from what these men were
Actual
writing
thing.
about the women. Copy and paste, literally. Like it was quite
Yeah.
easy for me as a author. I could just copy and paste it. And that's quite, so nothing about that was made up, the way that
Mm,
women were described in that era. And I
yeah.
think that carried through. And I think if there's a lot of modern day reflections on that too, because the way that women are often described in the media is in these degrading ways. That
Yeah.
hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And particularly sex workers as well.
Yeah.
Image. I mean, it is slowly changing, and in Victoria, at least, it was decriminalized only in 2022. So there is a slow,
Is
yeah,
that all? Oh gosh.
yeah, it's
Shocked to hear
crazy.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure what I'm in Sydney, but I think yes, I think it was definitely decriminalized before then.
yeah. I'll have to search it. I only know the Victorian one, but it
Mm,
shocked me. And so, yeah, that coincided with the release of the Women of Little Lon, and it's a
yeah.
really still a modern. I think there's so much that we can learn still from these women.
Yeah, for sure. And Mary Jenkins, can we just talk about her character very quickly? Because I think that is incredible because that was also inspired by a real life, person. So how
Yes.
did you come across her story?
Yeah, so Constable Mary in the book, for those who don't know, she's a woman who polices a beat and she's a police officer. And my publisher, when she acquired the butterfly women. She's like, oh, well, that's obviously made up. I said, oh, actually, I've based it on a woman that I think existed. And I found it in, there's a early chronicler of Melbourne. His name's Gary Owen. And he used to just write the scenes that he saw as he walked around early Melbourne, which is really cool. And
Mm.
he notes that he saw in the 1840s a short, stout immigrant woman, clever woman, who would trail after her husband on his beat. And when he would inevitably fall over drunk because he was into the drink, she would drag him home, don his uniform, and then continue on his rounds,
Yeah.
which is
How
so
amazing
cool.
is that? Yes, so cool. I mean, the bravery like is incredible for so many reasons.
Yeah.
I think it's so brazen, but yes, I think back then as well, especially so. So I
So
love
surprising. And so, of course, when I read that, I was like, well, she has to be a character. Immediately, I was like, she is a character in my book.
yeah. Oh, I'm glad that you put her in. That was very interesting to read about her. And, Butterfly Women also explores themes like trauma and friendship and reinvention, which I personally love. So is there any particular message that you were hoping that readers would take away after reading the book?
Mm, yeah, I've been asked this before, and I'm not too sure. I don't really write with a message in mind. I'm happy for readers to take away
Okay.
what they want. But having said that, I think, yeah, you're right. Female friendship has always been really important to me. I've always been really interested in how complicated and interesting female friendships are and how powerful and transformative they are. So that is definitely a key thing. I actually had a woman at an event like about a month ago, say something quite surprising to me, and I didn't expect it. She said, she came up to me in the signing line and she said, oh, this book changed my life. And I was like, oh, well, that's quite amazing. And I said, oh, how did it change your life? And she said that she grew up in a pretty poor family and she's a partner in a law firm now. And she's, really worked hard to build up this life that she has.
Yeah.
And she just reflected as she was reading this book that if she was born 160, 150 years ago, that this would have been her life instead, and it really made
Right.
her appreciate her life. And I guess that's the same for me. My direct descendants were living a
Mm.
very different life to me,
Yeah.
and I've had a lot of privilege and opportunities in my life that my ancestors haven't had. And I reflect upon my ancestor, my great great aunt Joanna Cleary.
Mm.
Joanna, at the age of my age, which is mid-30s, died in jail, and she'd been a sex worker all her life. And she was described in
Yeah.
miserable, diseased creature, and that
Wow.
is quite shocking
Mm.
when you think about it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that's not something you expect as an author, but it's a very lovely thing for someone to say.
To hear back, yeah, that it resonated and yes, it's made them appreciate their
Mm,
lives.
mm,
It's very powerful.
it is.
And just talk, yeah, the central women in this story, I love the female friendship theme, but they're all of them are very layered and vivid, and I love that, they're all quite fragile, but also fierce.
Mm,
Um, and that's tough to write, I would imagine, to strike a balance, not just once, but there's four main female characters. Or was one of them easier to write than another, or
mm.
was one particularly hard for you to write?
When you said that, I reflected on Madame Laurent, who's the brothel madam, and she
Mm,
presents a very fierce persona and
yeah.
perspective. She's an older woman. She's seen everything. She's really built up her business, but she has so many anxieties and personal anxieties, and that thread. And it's interesting because and this sounds a bit woo-woo and strange, but the characters come to me very easily. The plot and the storyline comes later. It's always
Right.
the characters that drive the story for me.
Mhm.
And so for me, character is not the difficult part for me to write because I can hear their voices. Joanna's voice was probably, and she's the Irish servant who aspires to be more. Her voice was probably the loudest, and so she was probably the easiest to write, I would say. But the others came quite well too. The things that I find hard in writing is red herrings and having a logical murder
Right.
mystery. That's
Yeah.
difficult. It's really tough because you want to be able to, um, you want the reader to be satisfied at the end,
Yeah.
to have them on a path where they're trying to guess the murderer. They might guess it sort of at a certain stage, but you also don't want to throw this random person in at the
Yeah. You
last
want to
second. Is
keep the
this satisfying?
suspenseful hook.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Super
That I
tricky.
think is
Yeah.
very challenging, but
Yeah.
character to me is yeah, it's not easy, but it comes to me more naturally.
Yes. I think the other difficult thing that I'm not a writer, but I think I would struggle with, accuracy when you've got a mystery and, you're doing all the suspense and the weaving and the back and forth. I would have to constantly be going back to fact check and make sure that, but is it plausible that it's this character? Were they like it's, I would
Yeah.
imagine that there's a lot of, yeah,
A lot of
going back and forth
layering.
and making sure, yes, everything was just right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It took a lot of time and careful thought and precision. And
Yeah.
I'm a pantser as a writer, so I don't know what's happening in the book. And that's
Right.
actually really hard when you're a crime writer. So
Yeah.
I write the first draft and then I have to go back and then very detailed plot out exactly where those key moments are.
Yes. Okay. Is that something that is becoming easier for you the more you write, do you think? The planning, or do you think it's never going to be how you write?
I describe myself as an agent of chaos when I write, and it's the only way I
I love
know.
it. Yeah. That sounds fun though, I have to say. I'm
It's
like,
so fun. I love
yeah.
it. I never
Creative.
know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
But this time, like I am writing a second book and it does have a mystery through it.
Okay.
I am finding that I'm writing very briefly just some key, I'm calling them beats, I
Okay.
think.
Yep.
And it's that they change, the beats are change as I go and progress and find out more about the story.
Yes. Okay.
It's definitely handy having, I think, beats this time around than just going fresh in.
Yeah. Was there any sort of major change to one of the characters or the plot, or did you kill off any characters along the way that you just did not see coming when you first started writing?
There was a major change later, actually. I'm not
Oh,
sure if it's
okay.
going to. I don't think it'll spoil it, but we changed the entire murderer's identity.
Oh, wow. That's huge. Yeah. Yeah.
So that
Okay.
was big. That was a big, big change,
Yeah.
and something that discussed very closely with my publisher, and we agreed
Yeah.
that this would be the best way
Yeah.
forward. And that took a lot of work because you have to strip everything. But the benefit is because I'm a pantser, I didn't know who the murderer was when I started writing the
Okay.
book, and so I
Yeah.
had already lots of possibilities,
Free reign.
yeah, red
Yeah.
herrings and possibilities laid in because I was trying to work it out. I'm like, wait, who's the murderer? Who's the murderer? Who's the murderer?
It's great for the suspense, I think, because it's not giving anything away. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, I was gonna also say I think this would be an amazing movie or a movie series. Like fingers crossed, because I would love to see this on a TV screen. Um, if that was to happen, who would you, anybody in mind for any of the characters when you were writing them? Did you?
Oh, yeah, this is hard because if you ask anyone that knows me, know nobody. I know nobody because I don't watch TV. Like this is the
Right.
only way I write is I
Yeah.
just can't watch movies or TV.
Yeah.
And so I actually have no idea who would play anyone, and I'm happy to leave that to other people. Yeah, someone asked me that. I was like, "Oh, I need a better answer." But the truth is
Yeah.
that I just have no popular culture reference.
Right. Yes.
Do you have anyone in mind?
Oh, I had so many ideas. I was thinking like a young Nicole Kidman for Joanna, but yes, I think
Yes.
I kept getting images of her, but yeah,
Yes, I
obviously
had
a
some
younger one.
friends send
Yeah,
me through a whole bunch of lists actually. So
yeah.
I
Oh,
could
how
like
cool.
circulate that and then put that on my vision board and have that
Yes,
manifest it.
yeah. I think that would also be quite fun. I don't know. Are you a creative person? Is that if it was to be adapted to a screen, is that something that you would want to be involved in any script writing or just
I
not
don't think I'd be involved in script writing
uh,
because I think it's really hard to adapt
quite
as a
technical,
non.
probably? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would imagine. But I mean, it would be incredible to be involved from an artistic perspective, I suppose, on any questions they have about the story and the plot. This
Yeah.
this it would be incredible. So we'll just put it
See
out
what
there to the
happens.
universe and
Yes.
see what
Press our
happens.
fingers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
I also think you've got such an interesting background. I did do a bit of research on you, diplomacy and living abroad, and it sounds
Mm.
like quite an adventurous sort of background. Can you tell us a little bit about your path to becoming a writer?
Yeah, of course. I've always been a big reader, so ever since I was young, and I've always consumed books, of course. I think most writers have. I actually worked as a bookseller as well for about 5 or 6 years. Um, oh, we might have lost you there. I'll just keep going. Um, I worked as a bookseller
Sorry,
for
yeah,
years.
just keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah, I'll keep going. I was a store manager here in Melbourne, and so books have always been part of my life. Um, my mum always says now, she said, I used to say that I wanted to be a writer, and she actively discouraged that because I think she just didn't want me to have that rejection, because it is tough. It's a tough business. And so, I got a stable job in government and I've had lots of opportunities as well. And I really enjoy my job. And it did take me overseas to China, which was a great place. And I really loved living in Canberra as well. But I remember when we moved to Canberra in 2016, I went to an event in Sydney, actually, and Kate Forsyth, another historical fiction writer, was there, and we were chatting at this event, and she asked me if I was a writer as well. And Kate probably does not remember this at all, but those very like formative conversations you have with
Yeah.
people, and I thought about it, and I thought to myself, I wish I could say that I was a writer at
Oh,
that
wow.
moment. And
Yeah.
I said, "Oh no, I'm not. I'm a reader. I'm not a writer."
Yeah.
And I could see it, and I was driving back from Sydney, 3 hour drive, and I was just like, "Oh, why don't I just give it a go and start?"
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I just started, and every single day after work would write, and I did that for well until the Butterfly Women came out. So I've been writing like every single day since 2016. So I guess that's 9 years
Yeah.
of writing, and it's been an absolute joy for me. It was a hobby that I told no one about, and I did it in secret. Only my husband knew, really. Um,
Wow.
yeah, until I got a book deal, and then I had to tell people, and they
Yeah,
were
was
like, "What?"
everybody surprised? Do you think people were surprised and when they were like, "Oh gosh, she's got a book we didn't even know you were writing?"
Yes, all my colleagues
Yeah,
in China had no idea.
yeah,
And so when I got back and then I got the book deal in 2023, so that was a year after I'd been back from China. Yeah, I was telling people like we had no idea you were writing in China. Like it's
yeah,
just yeah, and that's been I mean it's been so lovely because I didn't know any writers. I didn't wasn't part of the community. So the last couple of years I've been meeting people, and I think meeting other readers and writers has been the best part of all of this.
yeah. I love that. You've gone from like a secret passion, clearly talented to be able to get published.
Thank you.
Yeah, to coming out with your work. What was it like when you first got your book deal and you first realized you were going to be a published author? What-
Oh, it was amazing. So I was actually, I went through the Australian Society of Authors. They do a literary speed dating, and you get 3 minutes to
Ah,
pitch in front of a publisher. You can choose two publishers. And so I chose Ruby Ashby Orr at a Fern Press because I loved their historical fiction. And we had 3 minutes together. It's very quick. But Ruby requested the manuscript to read. 3 months went by, hadn't heard anything. And then the other publisher actually also, they contacted me after 3 months and said, "We're really interested. Like, can you send us the full thing?" I'd read about 100 pages. And I remember I was at work and I was in a Teams meeting with like Prime Minister and Cabinet, like pretty
oh
serious
gosh, wow.
people.
Yeah, that sounds like a very serious meeting. Yeah.
Very serious. And yeah, I remember looking down, my phone sort of just went off, and I don't normally check my phone at work, which is really weird. And so I
Yeah.
just happened to look, and it was an email from one of the publishers,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh well, I have to check. I'm in this
Yeah.
call, but I have to check. And I was looking for
Sorry,
the
Prime
words.
Minister.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. And I was
Clever
looking for the
fix.
words, unfortunately, because I was expecting that because it'd been
Yeah.
so long. And
Right.
then it said, "Oh, really loving this. Like, we're so keen to see more." And then,
Yes.
yeah, Ruby was like, "Let's have a Zoom call." So we had a chat. It was the best chat of my life. At the end of the call, she's like, "Yeah, we want to make you an offer." So I remember going to friend's house that night. She just had a baby and we were just on the couch and having a cup of tea. And she's like, this is going to be like, you're never going to forget this day. Like, this is one of those days you're never going to forget. And
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
joy of that was very exciting.
Yeah. I would imagine that's a hard feeling to match.
Yes.
So yeah, and that's interesting. So good to know that it takes time. You may have silence for months and months and months, even when they love your work. So keep that little flame of hope alive. It doesn't
That's
mean
right. They're
that
just
it's done.
busy.
Yeah,
They're very busy, and it takes 3 months sometimes for publish, or even more, for them to consider your work. Like it
yeah,
is, it's really tough. They have a huge pile of unsolicited manuscripts, and yeah, it does take time. But I think being polite always and not having too many expectations and just seeing what it is. And ultimately, if I hadn't been published, I would still be writing
yeah.
because it's the thing that brings me joy.
I love that. Um, and I know you said so you're not a planner so
Mm.
much when you're writing your novel or your piece of work, but do you have a writing routine when you are writing? Are you most productive in the morning? Are you a bit of a night owl, or do you just inspiration will hit and you just have to like sit down while you've got it in your head? What's your sort of writing style like?
Well, I've been full time for this whole period. I've just gone down to 4 days a week, so I'm still working.
My goodness. Yes.
So unfortunately, I don't have that luxury. But I mean, I enjoy my job as well. It
Yeah.
provides me structure for the day, I think. It makes me productive. I don't tend to write in the mornings unless I have the day off and then I'm
Okay.
productive. So I tend to I write in the evenings, probably between like just after dinner, so like 7:30 till 9:30, give it
Okay.
a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And if I get 1,000 words done, I'm good. And I can't, like, I work a lot from home. So I can't actually write in my office because it associates with
Right.
boring bureaucracy. Hopefully, no one's from work's listening.
Working for the company. Yeah.
So
Well,
instead, I actually, and I've always done this, I like
yeah.
to write in the living room because I like
Okay.
things around and
Yeah.
I like writing on trains as well because I
Okay.
like to have a business. So
Yeah.
yeah, when I'm in the office, I'll write on my commute into work on the train.
Yeah.
Just got to use every hour you can. And I just write on the couch, which is so bad for your back and posture. And I'm terrible. I do not recommend that for anyone
No.
else to do
I've
that.
gotten into a bad habit of like I like to work. I've got this amazing beanbag, but yeah, it's
So
probably not
good.
great for my posture. It's yeah, I've
I'm
got
gonna
it
have to get a
on the
beanbag, I
front
think.
of the heater. Yeah.
We have a nice fireplace because we live in like the
Oh, how
hills in
nice.
Melbourne, and I think
Yeah.
I can imagine having a
A
beanbag next
beanbag
to
there. It's
you going,
dangerous, I think. Yeah.
"Ew."
Not good for the neck.
No,
Um,
no.
yeah. I have to ask you about sort of like writer's block when, you've got in a creative slump or, you might be having a bit of self-doubt. How do you kind of pull yourself out of that? Or have you been fortunate that, you haven't had to deal with that too much?
I never had it with the butterfly women. That came out very easily, but I have had it subsequently in other work.
Hmm.
Um, and it's an awful feeling because writing is, like I said, something that brings me a lot of joy. But when it feels like a slog, it's never good. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to get the words down. So when that happened, I think the most important thing is just to step away from it, follow your instinct, and it needs some space and time, and then go back to it when you feel that urge to do it as well, to go back. And that's a hard thing to do, particularly if you've invested a lot of time already in the manuscript, to have to go to take time away. The other thing I like to do, and I've often solved problems by doing something else that's creative. I might go to, like, once I solved a problem listening to a piano concert in the city,
Okay.
or
Yep.
going to an art exhibition.
Something creative or just, yeah, getting
Artistic.
artistic. I love
You
that.
don't
Okay.
know where inspiration will strike, or even
Yes.
others have gone to writers' festivals and just listened to other writers speak. What
Mm.
the origin of the title, The Butterfly Women, came when I visited an exhibition at the National Library of Australia, and so this title wouldn't exist unless I had been out in the world observing. So
Yeah.
sometimes being out there and just observing things will give you that strike of inspiration.
Yeah. That's amazing. And not necessarily in a literary world, anything artistic.
Yes, anything artistic,
Yeah.
yes.
And I will say you are a very busy woman, so I didn't realize you were working, yeah, almost full time and writing, but you also co-host a great podcast called The Book Deal. Can you tell us a little bit about that podcast?
Yeah, and we're actually coming up to our 1 year anniversary, which is very
Oh,
exciting.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Tina Strawn, she's my co-host, and we started this about a year ago. We're both, at the time, both were intending to publish our first book. So we thought we'll interview other writers and other authors to understand what their pathways to publication have been to help motivate and inspire other writers. So we
Mm,
have, it's a very much a podcast focused on craft, on the publishing industry, and trying to pull back the curtains of
yeah,
that because it is quite difficult, I think, if you're an emerging writer from the outside to
for
get
sure.
information.
I think so intimidating as well. I think
It is.
if you
There's a
are
lot
an
of language and lingo
yes,
and all sorts
yes,
of things.
yeah.
We try and break that down, and it's been really great. It's just, the chats with authors are the best part.
Mm.
It's been fantastic.
Yeah, and I think so helpful for people who are thinking about writing or just getting started because
Yep.
everybody's story is so different, and I think some
Yes.
people's journey is a lot easier than others, but yeah, it's I think it's quite inspiring to hear. Yeah.
That's right, especially when you're in the query trenches, as they say. And,
Yeah.
we've spoken to writers who've had 20 years worth of rejections before they get the yes. And having the
Wow.
resilience and the persistence to do that, like that is very
Yeah.
admirable.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that I don't know, yeah. That I would be thick-skinned enough to keep going after that long, but yeah.
Yes, same, same.
Yeah. I have to ask, what would your best advice be for any emerging writer that's gonna, listen to this, that is trying to finish their first book or that's just started working on something?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I think the top tip is to read widely, and you have to read in the genre that you're writing, but read more widely as well, because it really makes a difference to your writing. And then engage in the community. You just because you're an emerging writer doesn't mean you have to sit behind the sidelines. Attend festivals, go up to writers, talk to other people, get a writing group, share your work. It's fantastic to do that. It's not something I did, and I wish that I had. I think found that because when you talk to other writers, there's an instant connection and an understanding, I think.
Yeah, makes everything a little bit easier.
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
I suppose that's what Connected is all about, isn't it? It's finding that
Yes.
connection and having
Yeah, like
shared
an easy
interests and
community to tap into. Yeah.
community. The community
Yeah.
has just been amazing. And we are so lucky in Australia to have such a wonderful and supportive Australian book community, not just writers, but readers as well.
Yes, for sure. And I think it's lovely that authors seem quite accessible in Australia. I think, especially
Yeah.
these days with Instagram and social media and stuff. It's yeah.
Yes, and social media is a hard thing for writers, I think, because we're not naturally gifted at socials.
Right. Yeah. No, I also struggle with social media. Very creative. Yeah. Um, and can you tell us, I know you sort of touched on that you're starting to write something at the moment. Is that something you can tell us about or is it too early?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell a little bit. It's set in Melbourne again, but
Nice.
it's 15 years later, so it's a
Okay.
little bit later, and it's set mostly in and around a bookstore, a woman who owns and runs a bookstore.
Okay.
And there's a murder mystery plot that will run through that as well. So it'll be
Ah,
another murder mystery, but it's in a time in Melbourne where, because 1860s Melbourne, it's pretty still raw, whereas
yeah.
the late 1870s, you're just approaching that marvelous Melbourne era. Uh,
Okay.
it's a cool time, I think, in Melbourne to be in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Mm.
Gosh, you will have all of Melbourne's history.
That's the goal. That I love it.
Into
It's
Melbourne. Yeah,
so,
no, I love it too. I'm so excited. I'll definitely be reading that one.
oh, thank you, Leah.
And just before we let you go, thank you so much for your time. If anybody has a last minute question before we have to let Madeline go, please type it in now. But Madeline, I would love to know what is one book that you have read recently that you could recommend to our book club?
Oh, a great book actually would be The Lotus Shoes by
Okay.
Jane Young.
The Lotus Shoes.
The
Okay.
Lotus Shoes. I've been recommending this book to everybody. Jane is an Australian debut writer. The book came out earlier this year. It's got a beautiful orange cover and it's set in the 19th century China. And it's inspired by her grandmother and family story and history. And it follows two women's perspectives. And it's very much about sort of untold women's stories in China, in that southern Chinese China, so Guangdong area. It is so beautifully researched, so beautifully told, and a fascinating story. And I absolutely loved it. It was a 5 star for me.
Thank you. Okay, I will definitely share that with the community as
Oh,
well.
thanks, Leah.
And look, Madeline, thank you so much for your time and all your insights. Powerful story. Loved it. I think it was very rich and thought-provoking, and surprising to learn about Melbourne's history and yeah, like it was such the freedom that some women had in certain regards, and then um
Oh, thank you.
very
Thanks.
eye-opening. Loved it. So yeah.
Thank you. And thanks so much for inviting me. And it's, yeah, been so good to chat. I'll never get bored of chatting about these women. They're incredible stories. And yeah, hopefully there'll be lots more in future to come.
Fingers crossed. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we hope that you loved this conversation as much as we did. All right, take care, everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.